Welcome to the show. Let's get right at it. This is an important topic. We're bringing in from the House GOP Doctors Caucus, Congressman and Dr. Greg Murphy and Dr. Nicole Saphier. It's great to have you both on. So this is one of the worst things that ever happened to the United States, the pandemic and then the botched shutdowns. Republicans now sending out a blitz of interview requests, Congressman, to Dr. Fauci, officials at the NIH, CDC, HHS, FDA, about the origins of the pandemic, the dangers, side effects of vaccines. What new information will we get on this? What do you think?
Well, it'll be very interesting with Dr. Fauci, who's not been very forthcoming during this entire thing. You know, the hardest thing about this with Dr. Fauci is that he's been displayed such arrogance throughout the entire proceeding that, you know, he's not taken care of patients for 40 years. So, you know, patients and citizens always have been in the mindset that they can trust their doctors. He's displayed an air of arrogance throughout this entire thing, that there was no gain of function done in the Chinese Wuhan lab, or the origins did not come from the lab. There have been so many mislabeling and basically lies or fabrications that he's told and then backed up on, that it's just to undermine the trust of the American people in the healthcare system that we have, or WHO or abroad. So it'll be very interesting to see where we can get to the bottom of some of these things and fabrications that have undermined American medicine.
We're waiting to hear if the Senate Republicans will try to pick this up, given that it looks like, you know, because of what's going on with the Senate in terms of control, what's going to happen there. You know, Dr. Nicole Saphier, Dr. Fauci is now doing media downplaying all of this. Remember when he said he is the science, that he himself is the science? Yeah. Then why is he against informed consent, Dr. Saphier?
Well, he certainly does have a high opinion of himself, and while I didn't appreciate that opinion, you know, I do believe in informed consent, especially when you're talking about putting forth vaccine mandates. You know, one thing going on right now is we saw Governor DeSantis down in Florida is putting together a committee to look at what the vaccines essentially has done. Has there been harm? You know, what have we seen from that? And, you know, I want to just break it down. Nearly 13 billion mRNA doses have been delivered in the United States alone. There have been thousands of reported cases of adverse events, and there have been some fatalities. Now, when you give treatments and vaccines like this and masks, you do expect to see some side effects, even severe ones. But the biggest issue I have here with Dr. Fauci, Dr. Walensky, and everyone is the lack of transparency regarding the fatalities and injuries, and well as the unwillingness to consider them moving forward with the recommendations. You even had Dr. Walensky in summer of 2021. This is when you started seeing cases of myocarditis, the heart inflammation following the vaccines. Dr. Walensky tweeted out, myocarditis and pericarditis are extremely rare, and myocarditis and pericarditis are much more common from COVID-19 itself. Well, let me tell you something. If she actually read the entire study, the New England Journal of Medicine study that came out with the conclusion that heart inflammation is more common after COVID-19, you would see that, yes, as a whole, all ages and risk factors, that is true. But when you start looking at specifically men under the age of 40, especially those who are healthy, there is a much higher risk of myocarditis and side effects than that as when you just talk about it as a whole. So the fact that they continued to put forth their recommendations and their talking points, talking about all ages and all risk factors, that is dishonest, that is wrong, and that is why it's important for us to look closer into it.
So it's important what the doctor just said. It's about informed consent. So, Congressman, why downplay the dangers of this? Do you hear? By the way, now we've got sound right here. I want you to listen to this, to what the doctor just said. Dr. Fauci is criticizing Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. He wants a statewide grand jury, as the doctor just said, to probe those who have misled on the dangers of and the side effects of COVID-19 vaccines. You're going to watch Dr. Fauci talk about that. Then you're going to see a doctor contradict Dr. Fauci. This doctor has repeatedly testified before the FDA. He's got an inside track on what the FDA was saying about the dangers of these vaccines. Watch this.
I don't have a clue, Kate, what he's asking for. I mean, we have a vaccine that unequivocally is highly effective and safe and has saved literally millions of lives.
Our mRNA shots are safe and effective. Well, I would say that from the day that these were authorized in December, there was uncertainty on if the benefits were going to outweigh the harm. There were 4 people, I believe, who voted against authorizing it that day. In a climate of when everyone was scared, almost everyone, to vote no on that would have been. So there's uncertainty. There was definitely uncertainty on young people, people with no risk factors. That's clear. There was uncertainty when we authorized the booster. That is clear. We had all the scientists or nearly all, vote to not authorize it. They voted against authorizing it. Then the FDA came back and said, okay, how about just in over 65? Then they said, yes, we'll do it in over 65. Then the CDC, 2 to 3 weeks later, tries to authorize the booster for all ages. Scientists advisory board votes against it. CDC goes, let's not listen to these guys. Just recommends it for all age groups.
Do you hear that? So what Dr. Fauci said, they're safe, is that a lie? This doctor's saying it's a lie.
Well, Liz, I think you have to look at this as a perspective. I've said since day one, I was pro-vaccine and still am pro-vaccine. But you have to put it down that this is a decision that should be made between a patient and a doctor, not a citizen and a government. And as with any vaccine, you look at risk populations. I think the 65 and older are at-risk populations. But I've said this for a while, and this is indeed confirmed, that the under age 40 individuals, especially males, are not at risk unless they have some type of immunological problem, diabetes, lymphoma, some of these other things that go on. Same thing with the under age 18 children. I just adamantly don't believe that should be made by a government.
You know, Dr. Saphier, it doesn't take a ton of research to find that the FDA pulls on average about 30% of the drugs it approves because of problems. There's a real fail rate out there at the FDA approved drugs, even after coming to market and years of testing. So if Dr. Fauci is the science, why doesn't he ever admit to that when that vaccine was rushed to the market and we've got studies pouring in on the side effects, you know, on Pfizer, Moderna vaccines, younger people, females, studies out of Germany demonstrating that people are suddenly dying from after their COVID-19 vaccines from myocarditis.
Well, I think it's pure
Listen, there's been
arrogance.
great benefit to the vaccine,
Sorry,
but
Dr.
specifically those.
Okay.
So there has been great benefit to the vaccines, but specifically those in the elderly and those with medical comorbidities. But the biggest failure to date has been the universal recommendation for all ages, especially as the full vaccine, the boosters, and those there and so forth. But I can tell you the FDA, they have lost 2 high-ranking members because of the way that they have handled this. And I think that the FDA, just like the CDC, needs to be gutted out and replaced with people who are nonpartisan and won't cave to pressure under the White House. So
you wonder if in the future, Congressman, we're going to get, you know, maybe vaccines that talk about the side effects. You're going to maybe get some warnings about, you know, about their use. Maybe your final word, Congressman Murphy, is that coming down the road? It's going to be like a warning on these vaccines?
Again, it just goes back to the principle of informed consent that we talked about earlier. This is something, there is no medicine, good Lord, aspirin has side effects. Right. So there's no medicine that does not, and it's informed consent, and it's, again, vaccines for at-risk populations. So I think that's where you have to start back.
Final word. You know, we've got Dr. Fauci in the bully pulpit. Yeah. We have no idea about the long-term side effects of these, Dr. Saphier. We're still in the first innings of this. It could take a decade for all of this to come out.
They've already added warnings on the labels of these vaccines, specifically the myocarditis. But the problem is you have the CDC coming forth and having universal recommendations, and then you have the trickle-down effect of mandates. So until you take away the power enforcing these mandates, those box warnings don't mean anything.
Got it. Great interview. You guys are terrific. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays to you both. We'll have you back on again soon. It's good to see you.
Merry Christmas.
Same here.
Thank you.
Okay.